If you want to better manage your stress, it's really important to understand these two very, very, very important things. One, the way in which you perceive external events is going to influence whether you experience stress or not, right? Number two, it's important to identify the things that make you vulnerable to experiencing stress, right? Let's jump into the first one. Stresses are random everyday events which have the potential to cause stress depending on how we interpret that stressor, right? Let's say that you had a very important job meeting to go to. You really need this job, you need the money that goes along with it. It's extremely important. You're on your way to the job interview and you miss the bus, you miss the train, whatever it is. Chances are, because you know how important this interview is, you are going to experience a lot of stress, right? You are going to recognize, I really need this job. I can't afford to lose this job. I'm going to be late. It's going to be a bad impression, etc., 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 right? Well, let's remove the job interview factor for it, right? Now, let's just say you want to go into the city to go shopping or something like that. There's no real obligation. You can get there when you get there, right? You miss the bus, you miss the train. Do you experience stress or do you just shrug it off and say, well, I'll just wait 15 minutes, right? It doesn't bother you as much, right? So the way that we interpret these events determine whether we experience stress or not. And it also determines to what degree we experience stress, right? The second factor, looking and understanding the things which make us more vulnerable to experiencing stress. What happens when we're tired, for example? We're more vulnerable to stress because we're already in an excited state, if you will, right? We're already in a position where our brain doesn't want to do a lot of thinking, right? Our brain is just going to do that automatic default setting. This is bad, this is bad, this is bad. It's not going to sit there and engage in cognitive flexibility and say, well, here's an alternative and et cetera, et cetera. It's just going to do that ordinary default setting of this is going to be a bad thing. And so you're going to experience stress, right? So once you understand what is it that makes me more vulnerable to stress, right? For me, for example, flying makes me absolutely vulnerable to stress. Going to a different country, being in a different culture, things like that. Sleep, lack of sleep, definitely makes me more vulnerable to stress. But what makes you more vulnerable is, well, are you more vulnerable to stress when you're with your family, right? Are you more vulnerable to stress if you haven't eaten for the last 3 hours? So, again, identifying these sort of factors which make you more vulnerable to stress can help you to become more resilient to stress. There we go.